Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's Jasveer Singh here from City Sikhs. I'll start with the Fateh Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening in an event which is being co-hosted and co-supported by the Faith Forum for London. Today, we're going to be talking about public art in London and the funding that is available for such. I'll give you a bit of background before I start. At the start of this year, at the start of 2021, the Mayor of London launched the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm, and various individuals were added to the group as commissioners to explore what it means to live in London in the present day, and to look at how best to reflect the diversity that exists within London. Now, what the Commission is doing is reviewing what makes up London's public realm, talking about what legacies should be celebrated, and then making a series of recommendations to establish best practice. The Commission is working with a number of different organisations. There is a specific focus on ensuring that London's public art, for want of a better word, better reflects the reality of London and Londoners today. I'm one of the commissioners on the panel, and the panel has a number of different commissioners ranging from TV celebrities through to local activists. Riz Ahmed is another individual who is on the panel. And part of the work that we're trying to do is making sure that London looks better represented in the public realm. Part of that involves this funding, which has been allocated by the Mayor of London and the Greater London Authority. That is for stories to be told, or Untold Stories is the name of the fund. It's a specific fund which we will hear about in greater depth in a few moments. We're privileged to be joined today by a number of experts and individuals who'll be talking more about how faith communities, as well as people from the Sikh community, can apply for this particular fund. And we will be hearing from Anne Hartley and Joe Baxendale from the Greater London Authority on that. We will then be hearing from Tam Desi MP, the MP for Slough. He is on the board for the Sikh Memorial for the Second World War. The National Sikh War Memorial Trust. He sits on the board there. And the purpose of that trust is to establish a national monument which reflects the contribution made by Sikh soldiers to the First and Second World Wars. So we're grateful to Tam Desi MP for being able to join us this evening. We'll then have a presentation from Sonia Rai, who is from Paint the Change. Paint the Change is a community-based organisation which looks to change the way that we perceive public spaces through murals, through publicly commissioned work, and through really trying to change attitudes that people have to the spaces around us through the means of art. So again, thank you to Sonia Rai for joining us this evening. I'm now going to ask Anne Hartley and Joe Baxendale to say a few words and to give their presentation. So I'll now hand over to Anne and Joe.
Thank you, Jasveer. Hi, my name's Anne Hartley. I am the Grants Officer in the Culture and Creative Industries Unit at the Greater London Authority. And so I am currently responsible for looking after Untold Stories, which is the new fund we're going to talk to you about today. Joe, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yep. My name's Joe Baxendale. I'm a Senior Policy Officer at the Greater London Authority, and my role is focused on visual art and the public realm, which is the reason I'm here. And also my role sits in the Culture and Creative Industries team. And are you ready to start sharing the presentation? That'd be great.
Oh, there we are.
Go on. I was going to say I'm one of the team who's working on the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm, of which Untold Stories is a part of that project. And maybe, Anne, if you move to the first slide, yep. The catalyst for the Commission for Diversity came around in 2018 when, in response to the lack of representation of women in London's public realm, we erected a statue of Millicent Fawcett. Fawcett was instrumental in improving women's rights and getting the first women in the UK the vote in 1918. She is the first woman to have a statue in Parliament Square, where there was previously 11 statues of men. As Jasveer briefly mentioned, the Commission's role is to enrich and add to the current public realm and advise on better ways to raise public understanding behind existing statues, street names, building names, and memorials. It is committed to helping the public to have a better understanding of London's diverse histories. There are 14 commissioners. Of course, Jasveer is one of those. But the Commission is also working with a partners board of statutory bodies such as English Heritage and the Arts Council to review and further the discussion into what legacies should be celebrated. Crucially, we are also working with the London boroughs, who are often responsible for very practical, logistical and permissions for making changes to and adding to our public spaces. Untold Stories, which Anne will be talking about shortly, is part of the wider work of the Commission, and it focuses on supporting local groups to create change in their communities. We are also working on developing more significant national projects, as well as evidence gathering, education and engagement programs, and fundamentally looking at how, by 2023, there will be more objects in our public realm and our public spaces that tell a wider, diverse, and more representative story of London. So I hand back to Anne.
Thank you. So just to talk briefly about how we created Untold Stories is in October 2020, we had some conversations and focus groups with Londoners to talk about how they felt in London's public spaces and how they viewed the public realm and whether they saw themselves within it. And there were a lot of common themes from those roadshows, which really included people wanted to make community-led participatory decisions. They wanted to celebrate everyday Londoners, not just sort of heroes or the great and the good. They were keen that there was some education and participation in the programme. They wanted us to celebrate intersectionality, look at systemic inequalities in terms of who decides what is in the public realm, and to think about the digital public realm. So this community engagement, alongside the commissioners, the partners board and the borough working group, really helps guide the overall programme. And Untold Stories is built on and contributes to this work. So what is Untold Stories? It's a new £1 million fund that will be distributed over 2 funding rounds. The first round is open now and has a deadline of the 12th of January. And then round 2 will open in spring 2022 and we'll sort of have a long window over the summer with a deadline in September or October 2022. And Untold Stories is really looking to fund community projects that either create new objects that increase diversity and representation in London's public spaces. And we've said objects because we don't want people to just think solely about artworks, to think about sculptures or murals, which are of course included, but could be plaques, benches, gardens, play areas, parks, anything in the public realm, or projects that provide context, insight, or draw attention to invisible, contested, or missing heritage in London's public spaces. And this could be things like walking tours or trails, alongside things like augmented reality projects that perhaps offer something different or more context to what is already within the public realm. Who can apply? We are looking for constituted community groups or not-for-profit organisations that are registered in London and have a turnover of less than £500,000 per year. We're really keen to support grassroots, community-led organisations who have perhaps missed out on funding in the past, who have been too informally constituted to apply for funding, or have faced barriers or systemic inequalities in applying for funding. So we've set a turnover of £500,000 per year as the maximum, but we're really interested in funding people at the lower levels of that as well. If you're an unconstituted community group or mutual aid group, you can also apply to Untold Stories, but you'll need to work with a partner, a sponsor organisation who can support your application. And that's someone who can submit their governance documents, write you a reference letter and agree to accept the funds on your behalf, and ring fence them for use on the project. And priority will go to organisations or groups that are majority led by Black, Asian and minority ethnic Londoners, deaf and disabled Londoners, LGBTQ+ Londoners, women or people from a lower socio-economic background, because that's what we know is really missing in London's public spaces. 2 levels of funding are available through Untold Stories. The first are our small grants, which are called Test and Nurture. And they're really to develop a new idea, test something, talk to your community about what you might want to do in your public space. It's really for developing ideas into projects. So it may be that you've been thinking about something for a while, but your organisation hasn't had the resources or capacity to make it happen, that you needed to perhaps work with an artist or local heritage or historical society. But again, you've not had the finances to do that. Test and nurture grants really are there to give you an opportunity to develop that idea into a project. You don't need any partnership funding you don't need any partnership funding for test and nurture grants. We're happy to fund the full costs of the activity. You just need an idea with some goodwill behind it and a sense of what you need to get where you're going. Then we have some larger grants, which are our Grow and Make Happen grants, and you can apply for up to £25,000 through this strand. These projects are, this fund is for projects that have been developed or tested on a small scale, and you've got a really clear plan of what you need to do next to make it happen. And these are the projects that will probably have some kind of outcome at the end of it, either a new walking tour or trail, a new artwork or object in the public realm. Again, you don't need any partnership funding to apply to this level of grant, but we encourage you to think about where else you might get other income from, depending on the scale of ambition for your project. And it's really important to also think about what your supporting kind is for these grants, as it's incredibly valuable supporting kind. And what it also shows us in a funding application is that there's a lot of people who are really willing to make this project happen, even if they can't put funds into it directly. For Grow and Make Happen, it could be that your project could be something completely new or something that has been working well, but you need funding to continue or grow it. And so this could include things like making and installing new objects, developing and delivering tours or trails, or new digital or augmented reality projects in the public realm. And we expect projects to take about no more than 2 years. Just to talk about some of the support and access for the Untold Stories. We've been running a series of information sessions, a blend of online and in person, although now mainly online, with partners around London, including organisations like City Sikhs and Faith Forum, to really give people a bit more of an idea of what you need to do to apply for Untold Stories. We also have a small access fund that if you have any communication needs that make a written application a real challenge for you, we can cover the costs of helping you to understand the grants and apply. That could be things like a BSL interpreter or a note taker, anything that you need to really help you get that application into us. We have the main application materials, including the prospectus and application forms, in other formats, which are BSL video, audio recording, and easy read. And then additionally, within your project, if you or your participants need additional support to run or be part of the project, you can apply for up to a further £1,000 for the test and nurture, and a further £2,000 for Grow and Make Happen to cover those personal access costs. And again, that's things like personal assistants, note takers, BSL interpreters. And it's really about the personal access costs to allow people to be part of the project, rather than the costs of making any final object or artwork accessible, as we would expect all projects to consider how they're going to be enjoyed by people from a range of abilities, including deaf and disabled Londoners. There is more information on our website, including the full prospectus with full guidance notes on applying. You can also contact Rocket Science, who are our grant managers, on the email there or on the phone number, and they're really there to answer any question, however big, small or silly sounding, to help you get an application in through the door. So I think that is it from us.
Anne, thank you so much for that. That's really helpful, and thank you, Joe, for helping us go through each of those. There's one question that has arisen so far from one of our members. Is there something for communities outside of London from your knowledge? Again, you're from the GLA, you may not know, but are there other funds that are available with other local authorities or regional areas?
I'm not aware of anything in other outside of London. I know Bristol is doing quite a lot of work in this area as well. Whether there's a fund, I'm not too sure. Do you know, Joe?
I know, not to my knowledge. There are obviously something like the Arts Council, which is the national funding agency for arts projects, and has offices around the country. It wouldn't necessarily be as focused as Untold Stories, but certainly it might be a possibility. And there's a National Heritage Lottery Fund, which I'm not aware of specific programs, but it might also be worth looking at what they can fund as well. Again, another national body.
Thank you, Joe. And the other thing that I would add is, as one of the commissioners on the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm, we're hoping that whatever models are set up and whatever best practice is set up in London, that it will be replicated by other authorities, regional or local authorities around the country. So if you have a specific area that you belong to, if you have contacts in your local authority or your regional government, then please lobby them and ask them if they'll do anything similar to what's being done in London. And you never know what the answer may be, but I'd strongly recommend that as a potential way forward.
Can I just say something, Jasmine, if you don't mind?
Yes, go.
You might be, I'm sure you are aware, Jasvir, is Art UK have been surveying all the public sculptures and monuments around the UK, and that is part of our evidence gathering about representation. And public sculptures and monuments memorials aren't the whole picture, but certainly that is a national project, and certainly it's worth looking at sort of what has come out of that survey, to understand what might be in your own area as well. So that's a good bit of evidence to say, if you're lobbying, we've got X amount of statues and, very few of non-white or representing non-white people or events or etc. So that's worth having a look at as well.
Thank you, Joe. And I think I'll just add to that the figures that were received by City Hall a few weeks ago, which says that out of 1,500, almost 1,500 monuments in the capital, more than a fifth are dedicated to named men, only 4% are to named women, and the number of sculptures that feature animals is twice that amount. 8% are dedicated to animals. And out of all of those, only 1% of sculptures are dedicated to people of color, named people of color. 0.9% of those, or most of those, are men, and only 0.2% of statues around the country are from named women of color. In London. So I think when you look at those statistics of London, which is out of 1,500 monuments or thereabouts, 0.2% are of women of color, 0.9% are of men of color. It does make you wonder just how much things need to change in order to improve that diversity. And I think the report that was carried out by Art UK was really helpful in that respect. And yes, indeed, the more that evidence can be used, the better. Thank you. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Anne. I'm now going to, and I'll ask you to come back later if there's anything else that you wish to add towards the end. I'm going to ask now Tan Desi MP to join us. Tan is an old friend of City Sikhs. Tan, lovely to see you as ever. Thank you for joining us. Tan is the MP for Slough, and he is also the Shadow Railways Minister. Tan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jasveer, to yourself and Rita and City Sikhs for kindly inviting me and for organising this online event. It's also a pleasure to follow Anne and Joe, and I think they gave a very thought-provoking presentation. And indeed, it's very pertinent to many of the issues that I'm going to raise. But Jasveer, I also want to commend you on your work within the Mayor of London's Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm. I think that's much needed. And indeed, whether it's City Sikhs, whether it's the Mayor of London and others, they have been very, very supportive of the project that I'm going to discuss with you today, namely the National Sikh War Memorial in the centre of our capital. Well, as the president of the National Sikh War Memorial Trust, within the next 8 to 10 minutes, I just want to describe to you what we are looking to achieve, where we've got to, and why it is so important to commemorate the incredible contributions, in particular of those turbaned Sikh soldiers, many of whom gave their lives. In fact, during the 2 World Wars, tens of thousands of turbaned Sikh soldiers died fighting for the Allied forces. More than 100,000 were injured. But unfortunately, in terms of commemorating them, when we look at the public realm, there is very little there that commemorates them. And in fact, there is no depiction of somebody with a different identity. And I think when Anne and Joe were presenting, how they explained about the statue of Millicent Fawcett on Parliament Square. I was there at the launch and I thought, wow, this is incredible, because it has helped to diversify our public realm, somebody that has had an incredible contribution to democracy, not just in our country, but much further beyond, that there is due recognition. And I think it's important that as we look to have greater parity between genders, there also needs to be greater parity in terms of diversity for those underrepresented sections of our community. And if we look at Sikh soldiers in particular, there are memorials in London, for example, for soldiers from the Commonwealth, for soldiers of Indian heritage, Pakistani heritage, and so on. But the difference with Sikh soldiers in terms of their depiction is that when you're wearing a turban, you stand out from the crowd. And that can have its benefits as well as certain times when children, or indeed even adult Sikhs, that they are the focus of bullying from various sections of the community simply because of the way that they look. And that is why I think it is extremely important not just to contribute the immense contribution, those that were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, our collective freedom, that as important as that is, it also is to ensure that we have greater community cohesion, greater integration within our country. Because when a young Sikh person would look at that statue, at that memorial of turban Sikh soldiers, that would be inspiring for them. That would also make them feel more included within our country, to show that we made a contribution to the freedom of this, our collective country. But in terms of the wider white majority British population, I think that depiction, that living history, will also help to tackle racism. It would help to tackle many of the misinformation that exists within certain sections of our community. So I think it's important on various aspects when we look at the fact that we want to make sure that our community is more greatly integrated. There is no statue of turban Sikh soldiers in our capital. In fact, there is no statue of turban Sikh soldiers anywhere in the world. Outside of India, even in India, there isn't a statue of turban Sikh soldiers who fought during the 2 world wars. So it would be a first. And I think it would be most fitting to have that within the UK, within London, because those soldiers from thousands of miles away fought for the freedom of UK, or of Great Britain. And that is why many of us felt strongly about it. This was a project that has been talked about for years, in fact, for almost 2 decades. Different individuals have been talking about it. But when I was first elected in 2017, I laid down an early day motion in the Houses of Parliament in December 2017 to say, look, we need to get support for this. And I am very, very pleased to inform our esteemed gathering today that was the most signed early day motion of recent years. In fact, definitely within the last couple of parliaments. And that is why when we had our parliamentary launch in January 2018, we had cross-party support. And in fact, in addition to the Mayor of London, my good friend Sadiq Khan, being present there for that launch and expressing his solidarity and his support for our initiative, we also had support from government. The then Cabinet Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Sajid Javid, was there, and he expressed his outright support for it, and to say that the government would help, whether that is in terms of financial help or any other help that we required. We also had support from the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, as he was then. And we also had support from the leaders of various other political parties. For example, the leader of the Plaid Cymru party was present, the leader of the DUP from Northern Ireland, and we had support, as I said, on a cross-party basis. So that was incredible to see. But I think one of the reasons why we had that support is we had 15 very generous individuals who pledged to make an individual contribution each of £25,000 each. So that meant that we had £375,000 as a starting point. But overall, our memorial will be costing significantly more than that, because we would like a world-class memorial close to Parliament, not in Parliament Square, but while I can't disclose the exact location at this point in time, because we are in close negotiations with Westminster City Council and the government to make sure that we have a fitting location for that. And we're also trying to dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of the actual sculpture itself. But I think that it's incredibly important that we have that support, and indeed I will be looking to support, as we've had from various Sikh organizations. And it was great to see that within the Sikh survey as well, that and the British Sikh report, we had the fact that an overwhelming majority of the British Sikh community, that they favoured having that National Sikh War Memorial, because as has been illustrated recently, there is a dearth of recognition for many. In fact, that lack of representation within our public realm is not something that any of us can be proud of. And that is why we need to push for this memorial to finally be instituted. The program that we are working to, we anticipate within the next 2 years, we will have the official unveiling of that. But I can't disclose intricate details of the project because, as I said, that is all pending final planning approval from Westminster City Council as well. But overall, I think that it is a project. While we have such projects in other parts of the country, in fact, when I served as Mayor of Gravesham, we had a community project there to have a statue of a turban Sikh soldier, squadron leader Puji, the late squadron leader Puji, who was decorated with the Distinguished Flying Cross. So there is a statue of him, a local war hero in the town of Gravesend. We've got similar such statues in other towns across our country, but there is a yawning gap in the center of our capital, and that is why many of us feel strongly that that's where we need that, so that we can help to inspire others. Many of you will know that the Sikhs have a very strong and proud military tradition. In fact, within the British Indian Army, which, by the way, was the largest volunteer army in history, wherein more than 2.5 million soldiers from the Indian subcontinent actually fought within the World Wars. And in fact, my late grandfather, the reason why I'm also very, very passionate about this particular project and about the incredible contribution of our ancestors is that my late grandfather fought in the First World War, unfortunately lost his leg. My grandmother's brother, my grandfather's brother, my cousin's grandfather, they fought in the Second World War. In fact, the makeup of the Allied forces and those armies that fought, in particular in the First and Second World Wars, they are a lot more representative of today's modern Britain, the makeup of our diverse communities, than many people would like to acknowledge. So we need to ensure that we have that diversity within our public realm and acknowledge the fact that 20% of the British Indian Army was comprised of turban Sikh soldiers. So those Sikhs who laid down their lives, who were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, but there is no fitting memorial to them. So I look forward to your Jasveer, and as well as City Sikhs support, as well as those in positions of power. And I can assure you that myself and other members of the National Sikh Memorial Trust, our chairman, Andrew Fain, and other trustees are working diligently, but we cannot make that a reality without your good support, as well as the support of the British Sikh community and the wider British community. Thank you very much once again for inviting me, and thank you also for your incredible work. And I look forward to working together with your good selves to ensure that we have that diversity in our public realm, in our capital, as well as further beyond. Thank you.
Tan, thank you so much for that. And you're absolutely right. We need to be able to make this change ourselves. It's important for us to know that when it comes to modern London and when it comes to Britain as a whole, that it has such a diverse history to it, that there are so many contributions which have been made by people from all over the world, and we don't necessarily all appreciate that sometimes. It's one of those issues where it's often spoken about, but when you go onto the streets, you look at place names, you look at various murals or memorials or statues or whatever it may be, it doesn't seem to reflect the modern world. And I think that's what is so important for us to be able to change however we can. And that's the beauty of Untold Stories, that Untold Stories is a fund where any people, any community organisations can apply in order to get that funding to change that, to have a new narrative being set up in their own local area, in their boroughs, in their town centres, wherever it may be. And Tan, personally, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the Sikh War Memorial, the National Sikh War Memorial, being unveiled at some point in the future. And this is a conversation that we will continue having at City Sikhs. And we look forward to the day when that can come about and we can all commemorate appropriately at that National War Memorial. Tan, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jasveer. Thank you.
I'm now going to ask Sonia Rai to say a few words as well. Sonia is from Paint the Change, which is a community-based organisation which looks to do much of what we're talking about today, having those untold stories being reflected however and wherever possible. Sonia, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you could just give a bit of background to what you yourselves do at Paint the Change, and that would be great. I'll hand over to you now.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Jasveer and City Sikhs, for inviting me to talk as well tonight. And I'm super excited to see Tan Desi's project come alive. Yeah, it's a long time coming. Yeah, my name's Sonia, and I guess I've always been interested in representation. And there's a phrase that keeps coming back to me, and I'm trying to find the source of it, but apologies, I still can't. But it sums up, I think, what the new funding pot will allow, and also what Tan Desi has been speaking about. And the phrase is, if I can see me, I can be me. And essentially, that's what we at Paint the Change try to do. We use art as a way to raise issues of social justice, and in particular, the themes of diversity, inclusion, and tolerance. And we try to use art to educate, inform, and stimulate discussion about such issues. And it's not a case where we hire artists and plaster a wall with a random mural, but we heavily engage with the communities around the world. So we've made over 60 now around the world. In fact, we had one in Delhi a few years ago. And we work with young people, we work with elderly communities, with families, with schools, with charities and businesses. And we actively seek out communities that have something to say about diversity and inclusion, and communities and faith groups that want to foster kind of positive dialogue and discussion, and really encourage respect and acceptance of everybody and difference. I've got a short clip to show you, just to show you how we work together. And this was a piece of work that we produced last year. And it was basically came off the back of a big discussion that we were having in this country around immigration, migration, following the kind of whole Brexit vote. And against that kind of backdrop, we had a big clap for carers. Every Thursday we'd be clapping for the NHS, and the communities we were working with at the time really kind of wanted to bring those two things together. And we found out that there were over 200 nationalities working in the NHS, and we thought it'd be a brilliant celebration of diversity to produce a huge mural to thank the NHS and to ask for 200 flowers, so each flower to represent a different nationality. And this clip is from the young people that worked on part of this mural. So I'm just going to share this now. Let's see. Can you see my screen there?
We can see your screen. I think you just need to click on the. I tell you what, is this the BBC News clip that you're wanting to share?
It's the Paint the Change one. Sorry.
Paint the Change one. That's fine. No problem at all. Just bear with me.
Sure.
My name is Effie. I'm a youth mentor. So you're a Paint the Change workshop. So you know commitment's really important, but so is your creativity. To realize that you're in a safe place, in a safe space where you can say what's on your mind, and you can be free, plus being creative. All right, so let's get cracking.
The Paint the Change are absolutely amazing. You feel so safe in the environment and you feel so welcomed as well. It doesn't matter what your opinion or your view is, you can talk about anything and everything. It's one of the most beautiful environments I've seen to really express yourself, and that's the whole point of art.
This art project is helping us young people come together so we can get to know each other better and how we act in front of each other, showing our true colours.
Not only have we been able to bring the community together, but also I feel as though a lot of times in schools and in our extracurricular activities, art is being lost in the community. And so having an opportunity to bring that back in this community, bring young people involved and let them outlet their imagination, their creativity into an art space, that's just been absolutely amazing.
Express those beliefs in the art, which is something I don't think I've ever really done with other people before, because a lot of the time you do it on your own. And because when you're on your own, you don't really think about other people's beliefs, and you know, it gives you food for thought really, and you include that. And I don't know if a lot of the stuff I've drawn would have been without other people saying stuff. Humans need creativity, they need stimuli, they hate being bored, and creativity really stops you from being bored.
Hello, my name is Matt. I create artworks in the public space. So essentially I paint walls, and the good news is you're going to paint with me. So I will be guiding you through some creative exercises, and we are creating something absolutely major. It's actually to celebrate the NHS. We are creating this giant mural you could see on the leaflet, which is going to be on the Rich Mix in Shoreditch. So one of the exercises we're going to do will be to create a flower, and all your flowers will go on this wall. So you are already becoming a street artist. We're going to get really creative during this workshop, and your work will end up on the Rich Mix in Shoreditch.
The mural we're all working on to celebrate the NHS and present as many flowers as we can. I think it's so beautiful, because when you look at a flower, you instantly feel good about yourself, and you see the beauty of a flower and its uniqueness, and every petal, it's different and it's asymmetrical. So none of the flowers you see will all be unique from one to another. So that's exactly what an NHS staff member is. Like, each flower represents them.
The 200 nationality for the NHS is a good thing to do, so we're showing our love back to the NHS, to the nurses, to the doctors, for putting us first and helping us through this.
Humans wouldn't be able to breathe without flowers. It provides oxygen for us. It's almost as if the NHS is our oxygen, and we're very thankful we have it.
How many hundred people walking past a mural, one of those might be a change maker, someone who can go and make that change that we're trying to sort of ignite. It's really the long game, but it's an amazing initiative.
It's so special that we've been able to kind of cross the generations, the younger generation and the older generation. They've got the NHS workers, and we've been able to translate that into art. And so 200 languages, but one language of love is something so powerful, because we're from so many different communities, from so many different ethnicities, but the fact that we have that one thing in common and that we can celebrate love and empathy is something that we've been able to bring together in art. And that's just something so special for our community.
Thank you, Tanvi, for sharing that. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain that really the mural is just the kind of souvenir of the process. A lot of the kind of magic happens in the workshops, because as I explained, you know, it's art to help educate and inform. And really, like Tan Desi was saying, you know, it's really about changing the narrative, changing attitudes, because often when we talk about migration and race and diversity, you know, obviously they're kind of hot topics, but to do them through a kind of creative way like this sort of softens the kind of energy, I suppose, and helps to kind of have those conversations in a sort of creative environment. So I just think that this fund that Sadiq Khan has launched is a really good opportunity for Sikh organizations and other faith and belief local organizations to really kind of grab it, so that we can improve what we see in our great city, and really kind of tell the lives and the experiences of all the people that make up the capital.
Sonia, thank you so much for that. And that video was fantastic. I loved how lively it was. And it's just good to see how passionate people are about wanting to make that change, wanting to paint the change,
exactly,
and wanting to just make a difference in their local area. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to add Anne back into this as well. And what we're going to do is just talk about some of the issues which have arisen, let's say, through the conversation and through the presentations that we've had. And I think it will be good for all three of us to just have a bit of a conversation about this. So one of the reasons why the fund was set up is because of the poor nature of diversity within the public realm at the present time. What I'd like to hear from perhaps Anne is, what kind of projects do you have in mind? Not necessarily the names of them, but just kind of like general ideas. What kind of things are you hoping that people will come up with and that they'll be making applications for?
Gosh, I've really tried not to come up with stuff, because I don't want to sort of presuppose or prejudge anyone's imagination. But I think just sort of thinking about some of the conversations that I've had with Londoners over the last few weeks at outreach events, there's a whole range of things. I was in Lewisham in New Cross, and they were talking very much about the anniversary of the New Cross fire and having a memorial for that there. Again, in Lewisham, actually, talking to a community centre who a lot of their young people attended the school that Sabina Nessa taught at. And so they want to do something in their local park, both as a memorial to her, but as a way of getting girls to stake a claim in their local park and encourage them to come in, which I thought was just a really sort of wonderful idea of bringing those two things together.
Yeah, that's very touching. And it's quite emotional as well. You know, both of those are effective. Well, one's a memorial to something that happened about 40 years ago, which deeply impacted upon Londoners, especially people of colour around London and around the country, but had an impact on London in quite a profound way. And then we have Sabina Nessa. So it's fascinating to hear what others are thinking of and how they want to mark those sorts of things within their own public realm and within their local area. Sonia, do you have any idea of other things that perhaps people could potentially apply for? Just general ideas.
You mean in terms of the things that they may want to produce, or?
Yeah, what kind of things are there that people could produce? And again, this is just to help give people a bit of an idea as to how they could come together and what they could put together.
Yeah, I mean, wow, the world is your oyster, isn't it, really, in terms of visual arts? I think what's really interesting, it seems to be that the culture of music is kind of always at the forefront of kind of, representing diversity. You know, it was in the sort of Black history. And, for me personally, in the 90s, it was when Talvin Singh and Bobby Friction and Asian Dub Foundation were sort of bringing their music underground into the mainstream, that really kind of I could kind of see myself in that space. So actually, I think a nice interplay could be around kind of oral history and visual art. So those kind of audio tours where, you know, you're getting sort of information and education, but in a way that is not heavy-handed necessarily, and in a fun, engaging, and appealing way. And then I think sculptures are kind of another way that we can bring those stories alive in a kind of three-dimensional way. But I recently we've been discussing how actually light can become a feature in terms of making public spaces safer. So following the Sarah Everard murder, you know, we've been looking at Paint the Change, how we can kind of weave light into painted murals so that we're making those alleyways safer for girls to walk to school. In Stratford, for example, we're looking at a project there. So I think the sort of interplay of kind of, rather than sort of flat 2D installations, the sort of 3D, bringing in oral and lighting can actually help not only beautify the sort of local environments, but also make the public spaces safer.
Yeah, and I think that's perhaps a byproduct of whatever can be put together as part of the Untold Stories, because it's about having those stories, which obviously exploring stories which haven't been told, which haven't been looked at in any great way, but then making it something that's has a more deeper public purpose, which can then create safer areas and safer spaces for individuals, especially younger people around London. I mean, for me, one of the things that I find quite fascinating is when we talk about places of worship, when we talk about religious communities, many of them have pieces of art that they consider to be part and parcel of their identity, which are there, which are present, which may be either on the outside of the buildings or inside the buildings or in people's homes. So there is that connection already, I would say, between people of faith communities and art. It's about how does that translate into the public? What can be created, which can then allow people from various communities to come together to create, you know, like the mural that was created for the NHS, like 200 nationalities, one language, one NHS, like the various statues that we have seen, including the Millicent Fawcett statue. There is a lot that can be done. I guess it's a question of how what people want to do, what they want to create from it, and what ideas they can come up with. For me, what I would like to see is community organizations on a kind of very localized scale, getting in touch with others in their local area. Be it, for example, you know, a local Gurdwara working with a local church, mosque, mandir, synagogue, and just coming together to perhaps create something, or even just youth groups in certain areas, you know, where you already have people from different backgrounds going along to that youth group, being involved there, then thinking about, right, well, there's a patch of land that we know which doesn't have something on it. What could we come up with? Or there's a bare wall on the side of this building. What could we create with that? And it doesn't need to be just a mural. It could be, as you said, the 3D mural. It could be an installation based on lights. It could be so many other things. And one of the things that I'm finding also fascinating at the present time is this, that lots of us are having to use QR codes when we travel around for obvious reasons. And there is this whole thing of the untold stories being told by having audio tools, as you were suggesting, Sonia, by having QR codes perhaps at certain spots around a town or a local area, where people click on that, have a look at whatever it is that then crops up, and they can get a better explanation. They can get a testimony of someone who used to live in that house, for example, or who saw a particular event take place many years ago. There's so much opportunity. And as you quite rightly said, we don't want to tell people what they should come up with. We want to inspire them so that they can come up with what they think is appropriate. And can you remind everyone when the fund, when the closing date is, the deadline for the fund?
Yeah, the closing date for round 1 is the 12th of January. But then obviously there's a second round that will open again in the spring with a deadline. We haven't set it yet, but probably sort of September, October time next year. And I think what we're thinking we probably will see is that some of those test and nurture grants from round 1 might turn into grow and make happen grants for round 2, so that we can really sort of help that develop the creative development of those projects.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. I'm just going to put up a couple of messages that we've received so far. So there we are. NHS is our oxygen. Someone seems to really like that, which is great. And someone else has said it would be great to see women given opportunities and open dialogue to shape projects. Now, I think we need to make it clear that this fund is open to everyone, regardless of how you identify, regardless of who you are. This is the opportunity to get together with others and apply for this fund, which could hopefully lead to bigger and greater things. Just closing remarks from each of you. Is there anything that you wish to say in closing before we bring this event to an end? Anne, I'll come to you, and then I'll come to you, Sonia.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just sort of wanted to come back to something that Sonia said, actually, with that if I can't see me, I can't be me, or if I can see me, I can be me. I maybe got that wrong, but yeah, I think that is really what Untold Stories is trying to do, is to be a more reflective mirror to the people that actually live in London, and so that's what we're really looking for, is those projects that really make people feel more included and more part of London and more valued and celebrated.
Thank you, Anne. Sonia, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think there's a real danger when we do discuss issues of diversity to become really kind of cerebral, and I think we just need to kind of remember that we're on this journey and we're in a sort of, you know, a really exciting time and a sad time, but also a positive time, and that, you know, the sort of difficult discussions are happening and will always be there. But if we can kind of spark and ignite the light and show the kind of, you know, allow people to be more visible, to be more proud of their heritage and our shared history, then yeah, it's just going to be a good thing. So yeah, just really encourage London organisations who, you know, as Anne and explained, and Joe earlier, about, you know, where they may not have got funding or support beforehand because they're at sort of early stages of their structures, to really kind of encourage those kind of tiny organisations as well to be heard and be seen.
Brilliant, thank you, Sonia. And I think that's perfectly right. For me, it's about making sure that anyone who has an idea, no matter how small or how bizarre it may sound, just apply, just make the application. Let's see where it goes. You have the opportunity to apply for this fund, and this is our opportunity to tell our stories. We don't get much of an opportunity to do that. So when the opportunity arises, take it with both hands. And I would strongly recommend as many people as possible to make those applications. And really, I can't wait to see what emerges from this fund and what untold stories we then are able to tell. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's very exciting, and it should be fantastic to see what emerges. Sonia, Anne, Joe, and Tan, thank you so much, everyone, for being able to join us this evening to give your thoughts on what can be done, and to share your own ideas and hopefully inspire others as to what they can do. And everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.